Redneck Rampage is one of the most fascinating FPS games I've ever played, but it's also one of the worst. Released in 1997 by Xatrix Entertainment, Redneck Rampage was a game that came and went without much of a fuss. This game was powered by the same engine that brought us Duke Nukem 3D, Shadow Warrior, and Blood, but unfortunately, Redneck Rampage falls short by a lot, and it's one of the most disappointing games I've played in a while. As you would expect in a game called Redneck Rampage, you play as a redneck named Leonard, and the ultimate goal is to save your pig Bessie and stop an ongoing alien invasion. This sounds like a great concept, and the game's humor and art style are really entertaining, but the level design and overall gameplay lets it down. The graphics in Redneck Rampage are charming, and I love the whole rednecks versus aliens idea, as it's ripe with potential. I've played games like Big Mother Truckers and Backyard Wrestling as a kid, and Redneck Rampage kinda falls in line with those titles. I haven't gone back and played those other two games, so I can't say if they actually hold up, but Redneck Rampage was never a good game, especially if you compare it to Duke 3D or something. The first level in Redneck Rampage is a mess, and it's way too big for the intro. The environment looks the exact same, so you'll end up going around in circles most of the time, and one of the most frustrating aspects about Redneck Rampage is how the keys are identical from one another. Yeah, so there are 3 keys you can collect in every level in order to beat them, but they are all grey, and there's no indication of which key works on which door. In a good game like Doom, there are perfectly color-coded keys and doors so you know exactly which type you need to get. In Redneck Rampage, they all look identical, so it's just trial and error on which key works on which door. This is terrible design, and even though I've heard that some source ports fixed this problem, it shouldn't have been a problem to begin with. Why couldn't they make the keys different colors in the original release? That is baffling to me, and speaking of frustrating design, the first map has a section where you are supposed to blow up this silo with almost no indication that you need to do so. I suppose the target on it and the dynamite on the ground is trying to clue players in, but it falls flat, and this could really confuse people. In other build engine games, there's usually a huge crack in the wall, or something clear to let you know that the wall is destructible, but with this, I don't see how you would figure it out the first time playing. Level 1 is complete nonsense, but I did want to talk about the core gameplay mechanics. The shooting is not bad at first, but then you realize that Redneck Rampage has very inconsistent hit detection and damage output. Sometimes it feels like the enemies are superpowered and will kill you on the spot, and there's other moments where they will hardly put a dent in you. Maybe that's just my experience playing the game and other people will think differently, but regardless, the combat itself is not that fun either. The pistol you get at the start is a weapon that you'll be using throughout the rest of the game, because the ammo for the other guns can be so limited in the later levels. The pistol has plenty of ammo, but it fires terribly slowly, and it sucks that players have to use this gun for most of the enemies. There are 2 redneck enemies that show up during the whole campaign, and they show up constantly, so get ready to fight them a lot, particularly with the pistol. All you have to do is shoot at them, take cover, shoot again, take cover, etc. until they are dead. Doing this for hours gets old really fast, and while you do get other guns later on, Redneck Rampage is really stingy with its ammo pickups. The shotgun is handy for taking out the rednecks rather quickly, but it can't take out a dog in one shot for some reason. Yeah, I forgot to mention that one of the toughest enemies in the game is a fucking dog that charges at you. This is ridiculous, and these fuckers will get you killed more often than any other bad guy I've noticed. It's a dog. It shouldn't be that much of a threat, but whatever. I recommend saving your better weapons for the bigger alien enemies later in the game, because they are pretty damn bullet spongy, and like I said earlier, the combat gets old quickly. At least there's a power-up system that's really inventive and is fun to balance out. So there are food and alcohol pickups scattered about the levels, and both of them restore your health. If you drink too much, then you get drunk, and that fucks up your movement so much that it becomes almost impossible to play. play. So in order to combat intoxication, you need to eat enough food, and that's where the game's resource management comes into play. Why don't I just use the food items only, you may be asking? Well, the food pickups are way more hard to come by, and alcohol gives you more health, so you are basically forced to play this little metagame. I think this is one of the small glimmers of light in Redneck Rampage, and as mentioned earlier, the health system is pretty creative and falls in line with the country setting. Level 2 is located in a timber factory as well as a sewer system, and again, the map design fucking sucks. Everything is way too convoluted, and I just wish they could have made more compact levels. But no, this game is a giant explorathon and it's not worth beating. In fact, I gave up trying to finish Redneck Rampage because the level design doesn't get better. You might think that the maps become more well designed as the game goes on, but that's just you adapting to the shit factor of Redneck Rampage. If I have to look up a guide on how to beat each level throughout the entire campaign, that's something to blame on the game. I've played 90s first-person shooters since I was 12, and while I'm just okay at them, I'd like to think that I have a decent sense of direction, but with Redneck Rampage, the levels are simply too broad. I didn't even mention how you end most levels yet, and you do that by bonking your head bubba on the head with a crowbar. Now if you cycle through your weapons using the mouse wheel, you will not find the crowbar, and instead you have to press 1 or the key that you binded to it. This is ridiculous, and I'm not sure why that the crowbar isn't just a regular part of the roster. Level 3 continues off from the last, and you end up in a huge junkyard. This map is set at night, and this might be one of the most lackluster levels to me, where I don't have too much to say about it except for it having confusing design. The following levels fall into this same category, until we get up to level 6. This is another sewer map, and it's a maze of tunnels that will most of the time end up leading nowhere. Redneck Rampage might have consistently poor level design, but level 6 is perhaps the worst map in the game. There are just about 10 million fucking aliens running about flinging their shit at you, and while that is kinda funny and Redneck Rampage is full of these comic moments, I recommend not wasting your time and running past them. If you try and fight back, you will waste your ammo in level 6 and you'll have nothing to defend yourself with for later on. I would continue on with all of the levels that I've played and discuss them, but there's really no point. The fundamental issue with each map in Redneck Rampage is the lack of direction, the pointless open space in them, and the lack of colored keys. It will take you 30 minutes to an hour figuring out most of these levels, and the gunplay isn't satisfying enough to pull you through to the end. If I had to pick the best level from Redneck Rampage, I would definitely mention the Nut House. Set in a mental institution or hospital of some kind, the level begins and your first objective is getting out of your cell. They took all of your weapons away, so it's back to basics, and this level is a nice change of pace from the others. It's not terribly long, and while it has some backtracking in parts, the Nut House is a pretty enjoyable level, all things considered. This is the level I can see myself going back to because of its charm and interesting approach with having no weapons and needing to collect them again. Speaking of which, the personality on display in Redneck Rampage is so entertaining, and it doesn't take itself seriously at all, which is always a good thing. If the levels were nicely designed and the gunplay was tightened up a bit, Redneck Rampage would have been a classic, and that's the most frustrating part for me. I love the graphics, the little details in the environment, the country music blasting in the background, the aliens that throw shit at the player, and the general attitude of the game, but fuck, it is brought down by the subpar gameplay and maps. This game could have rivaled Duke Nukem or Shadow Warrior if they stuck the landing with the core game mechanics, and apart from the unique item management, Redneck Rampage is ultimately a disappointment. I did hear that the game's expansions, Redneck Rampage Suckin Grits on Route 66 and Redneck Rampage Rides Again, have better level design, and for that reason alone, I'm compelled to try them out. With that said, Redneck Rampage is a ball of wasted potential, but it's one of the most fascinating and surprisingly endearing first-person shooters as well. You could tell that Xatrix Entertainment pulled out all the stops when it came to the game's character, identity, and humor, but they couldn't figure out the rest unfortunately. That is okay though, because they more than made up for it with Return to Castle Wolfenstein, which is arguably the best game in that franchise. Nevertheless, Redneck Rampage is not necessarily a hidden gem, but at least it's full of fun concepts and characters that still make me smile to this day.